Hey Mark, thanks for inviting me to your home. Very lovely home. So why don't we talk about the disappointing results of the April 28th Canada election,
Sure.
whereby the Conservative didn't win. I was so hopeful that they would.
You, me, and everybody else, I think.
Yeah.
Or at least half the population.
Yeah. So can you give me some of your thoughts about the election?
Yeah. Interesting, because it was a very close run, and it was a very divisive outcome.
Yeah.
Half the country got what it wanted, and the other half of the country didn't get what it wanted, and it was a pretty close thing. So, in the broader context, it'll be interesting to see what the future brings in terms of this next Liberal iteration. Is it more of the same? I don't know. Is it more of the Trudeau thing? I don't know. I don't have a crystal ball. But for firearms owners, it definitely didn't go the way we wanted it to. We know that, so it's a bit of a gut check. But, I mean, if you haven't been able to roll with the punches up till now, then you've probably long since turned in your guns and taken up knitting as a hobby or something else. Because if there's one thing we firearms owners know, it's how to keep throwing good money after bad in the pursuit of our passion, our sport, our, in some cases, hobby, in some cases, livelihood. And it really is that diverse. For firearms owners, I have to say it's not the outcome that we wanted to see, for sure. And I don't necessarily think it's a question of bad or worse. They say that Carney's a pragmatist. And the optimist in me says, okay, if he's nothing, if not a pragmatist, then the one thing he should be pragmatic about is the impending failure of the firearms file. And the firearms, the so-called buyback, the enforced confiscation, maybe with or without compensation, or adequate compensation. You would think that the government, if he's a pragmatist, he'd be smart enough not to double down on what has been a failed and failing program direction. And if he was a smart man, a betting man, I'd be looking for ways out of that saves the government some face, i.e. a new government, new fiscally responsible government in charge. We can't afford luxuries at this stage of the game. We're in a national crisis, blah, 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 blah. We have to pinch pennies where we can, and this is one place where we don't want to spend billions of dollars unnecessarily on something that all of the police associations have unanimously come out forward and agreed with is a non-starter. It just will not solve the problem that they're attempting to solve through the enforced confiscation, possibly with compensation. The fact remains that those firearms have never been the problem, never were the problem, been used for decades and decades without concern, without injury, without any ill cause to anyone. It hasn't been a problem. AR-15s never has a lawfully registered AR-15 been used in the commission of a homicide in Canada, ever, not once. So the whole thing is ridiculous. It's throwing good money after bad, chasing ghosts that don't exist. Because those firearms are not the problem, never have been the problem. My firearms aren't a problem. They've never hurt anybody and never would hurt anybody. They're under safe lock and key downstairs. They only come out when I say they come out. So I would like to think the pragmatist in Carney is going to realize that we need a different direction, a new direction with regard to the firearms file. And maybe he'll come up with some sort of a temporary compromise that'll see us through the next 3 to 4 years. Something like grandfathering with range privileges for those who have these sorts of firearms, so that the firearms are still frozen, can't be traded, bought, sold, whatever. If that's what the government thinks it needs, then that's fine. But at least let us use our private property for the purpose for which it was intended while we own it.
Are you saying similar to what the pistol in right now?
Yeah, similar to what we have with pistols right now. I think that would be not fair, because it's never fair. We're always on the losing end as firearms owners. Why should we have any curtailment of our use of our personal property whatsoever, other than in terms of public safety? But the fact of the matter is, you have to give an inch to get an inch, and in this case, compromise is probably going to be necessary, including further compromise on the part of firearms owners. And that means, perhaps in my mind, that we gain range privileges in exchange for keeping a freeze on transfers, for instance. I don't know. We shall see. What we all need to hope for in the future is a conservative wind that will follow through with the promises from the last election campaign, because the Conservatives were campaigning on a win-win situation in terms of the firearms file. What they proposed, I thought, was common sense, fair, fiscally prudent, and yet with a 100% focus on public safety where it should be, on effective public safety. So, like I say, it's not all doom and gloom, especially if Carney the pragmatist comes through with his realistic ways. But, the jury's still out. It remains to be seen. It's still early days. He's only been in government for a week. He promised on the campaign trail, I think to his dismay, when he trumpeted, we're gonna double down on the buyback program, blah 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 blah. It didn't get him the round of applause that he thought it was going to get him on the campaign trail. When he brought up the firearms file, it was a big nothing burger. Like nothing. The media wasn't even interested anymore. So I think the firearms file has pretty much run its course as a wedge issue for the Liberals to be able to use in an election capacity. It's been bandied about the bush back and forth through an election cycle, and I don't think there's much to be gleaned from that particular file any longer in terms of political advantage. So we'll see what happens over the fullness of time, but the ball is firmly in Carney's court. He can do the logical thing, the smart thing, the fiscally prudent thing for the country, and simply hold things where they are right now, ideally giving us back range privileges in the meantime, with a view to eventual grandfathering or some sort of program like that, similar in a way to the handguns. That would be a reasonable compromise in my view. But then again, I'm not the guy in charge. So,
what do you think of this election of Natalie Provis? You think she'll push for that SKS to be banned?
Could be, behind the scenes, certainly. It's got nothing to do whatsoever. The firearms file has nothing to do with her assigned file as a minister of state, which is a mini minister or a wannabe ministerial position with limited scope, and hers is nature. So she's got the nature file, something to do with her background as an engineer somehow, I guess. In any case, she has nothing to do with the firearms file as far as the workings of government are concerned, but she is in Liberal caucus, which means she'll have a voice at the table and will be the one that they all turn to when they're looking for ideas for firearms control. There's no question about it, because she is the so-called Liberal expert, which makes her an expert of absolutely nothing, because her ideas about gun control and the role of firearms within Western society are completely out to lunch. She's a rabid anti-gunner. She believes that nobody in Canada should have firearms at all of any sort or any description for any use whatsoever, and she's clearly stated that in the past. So she's no ally of the firearms file, that's for sure. And I think the Liberal government will very quickly come to realize that she's more of a liability than she is an asset.
Yes, I hope so.
In any role.
Now, what about the SKS? Now, I have a large following of people.
That's a tough one. I personally, I think we're going to see, as much as there's going to be a huge hue and cry about it, I don't think the media will give it any traction. I think what we're going to see is a two-tiered system. We're going to see First Nations given treaty hunting rights and all the rest of that, and continued use of the SKS rifle. And we're going to see those of us who are not First Nations basically have our firearms added to the ban list. I honestly think that's the direction they're going to go. The SKS, unfortunately, because it is one of the most widely available, widely affordable and reliable, durable, and practical firearms out there on the Canadian market, that it's extremely popular.
Yes.
And because it's extremely popular, there are tens and if not hundreds of thousands of them circulating out there.
Yeah, I'm guessing 200,000.
At least. And, you know, you're never going to get rid of all of them. They're all non-restricted. Nobody knows where they all are. They're everywhere, literally everywhere. In the back seats of pickup trucks, on the floorboards of boats. They're everywhere. Bottoms of canoes. SKSs are everywhere, and they'll never get rid of them. They'll never hope to get rid of them through a ban or anything else. I think what they have to do, I think what they will do, is realize the inevitability of the situation. They're going to have to basically approve them for First Nations use, because First Nations depend on them as a hunting rifle. And they're going to have to do something about them for the rest of us. But I honestly think you'll see a two-tiered approach to the SKS, one that will appease the natives and piss off the rest of us.
Well, Mark, thank you very much, as usual, your honest thoughts about the election and gun owners in Canada.
I don't necessarily like where it's going. It is what it is. You ask me my opinion, I'll give you my opinion. It doesn't cost me anything. But firearms owners, it's the old saying, right? It was the worst of times, it was the best of times.
Yeah.
It could be the best of times. We're on the cusp of recovered greatness, if you will.
Right. Mm-hmm.
All it'll take is that conservative vote, and we'll get what we've wanted for all these years. And I think it'll be fair to everybody concerned, including the firearms lobby and those who want to see nothing but the responsible, safe use of firearms in this country. We can achieve that. We had that before the government decided to somehow confusing and conflating law-abiding firearms ownership with the illegal use of firearms. The two are worlds apart. Law-abiding firearms owners have nothing to do with the illegal and criminal use of firearms in Canada. Quite the opposite. So, we're one step away from complete doom, and we're also one step away from relative freedom. How it goes is anybody's guess.
Well, thank you very much, Mark, as usual.
You're very welcome.